um, what clients are looking for, who clients are hiring, what photographers getting jobs, what their portfolios look like, what ads look like, what kind of, how the ads are used. So just understanding what the space that I'm working in looks like. I put a lot of research into that. And then once I get a good idea of what type of work needs to be created in order for me to get that type of work, I start planning. I start coming up with a project or maybe a test shoot or maybe working with somebody in the community that could provide me with the atmosphere and the story that I need in order to capture something that makes sense. And then lastly, I execute. And executing sounds like it's just going out and doing it, but it's, to me, the most important step in the process. So let's go through what these look like. So started out with the very simple research of what are fitness brands looking for? What do those images look like? They're all different kinds of images. They're all different kinds of photographers working out there, creating different type of work. What kind of work resonates with me, and what kind of work do I feel like I can create and I want to create? So just looking at what fitness brands are doing and what the really, really successful photographers are making, it's just a question of like just going out there and consuming all of that stuff and doing as much research as you can. And then you go from that to how are they making these images? A buddy of mine, Aaron Smith, is a highly successful photographer out here in LA. He shoots a ton for Peloton. I would encourage everybody to go to his Instagram. He has 2 highlights, one for BTS and one for testing, on how to test. But this is an example of what it takes to make a Peloton image. And you'll notice over here on the image on the right side, the ground is wet. There's something covering the light. Like it's a rainy day, but the image looks like it's a sunny day in LA at golden hour. And so just understanding the amount of production that goes into building an image. Here's another example where it's second floor house and completely rigged up to make it look like natural light. So just understanding how these images are made, where you're, what you're going to be asked to do, what you're going to be asked to create, and then figuring out how to do that with your budget, with your, with the tools that you have around you. It's a crucial step in the research process. And then you plan. Like, for example, if you're doing a spec shoot or a test shoot, you have to think about it like you're actually working for a client, you're actually working for a brand. So the process that I go through is I pick a brand that I'm working for. I write a whole campaign for what the ad, what the shoot is going to be about. I build a team, whether it's talent or hair and makeup or any of that stuff. You have to decide who you're going to get together. Find a location. I do a ton of location scouting. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm constantly going around pinning locations on Google Maps and taking pictures of locations at any time. And then working on a mood board or a pitch deck, something concrete that you could share with people, but also something concrete that is sort of like documentation of what you're actually trying to do. Sometimes it's definitely good to share with somebody else, take what's in your head and put it in a PDF or something like that, so that other people understand what we're trying to do. But it's also good for yourself to document it, to keep your ideas steady. Like you can take 2 months to work on a project, and what you thought about in June, you might have forgotten in August. So you need to sort of keep track of that stuff and help things evolve and start asking questions that you can also answer in the pitch deck. I'll give you an example of that later on. So be a little bit more concrete. The other way you could also do it is you could find a story in your community that you want to tell, whether it's a local. Hello?
I know that like when he was at Landon summer camp last year and he had
Jeez.
a
Let's put Laura Chase
all I
on.
can think of is ASD, but that's not correct. But he had basically like a work therapist with him almost every day, and the days
Everyone
that
here, Laura Chase?
was much harder for the teachers and counselors. And basically, I just don't want him to get into a summer camp that like he gets kicked out of because they don't know how to help him.
Right. So we provide one-on-one.
Mike, can you help? There we go. That sounded like a riveting.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So yes, the other thing you could do is find a store in your community that will help you create those images or help you build that part of your portfolio. It could be a local business. It could be a personality, like somebody who like maybe running for office or as a fitness instructor or something along those lines. Could also be a charity. All of these people could use new work, and then reach out to them, come with a vision and tell them that you want to create something for them, but it's also going in your portfolio. And this is the last and the most important step, executing. And the reason why I think it's the last and most important step is that it's where people tend to take shortcuts, right? You're doing a lot of planning, you're pitching the idea to somebody, you're going through that whole process of building out what you want the shoot to be. And then when it comes down to actually put, boots on the ground and actually do the work, that's when I see that a lot of people try to, take a couple little shortcuts here and there because you've already done a lot of work. You can reward yourself by taking it easy on the back end, which I think it's a terrible idea. The example I'm giving here is if you have the perfect location that's an hour away, but you have a location very close to you that isn't as good, but it's pretty good, don't take that location that's close to you. Take the hour drive, because once you start taking shortcuts here and there, those shortcuts all add up. And when they all add up, you get a product that's not as good as it could have been. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create something that's impactful, that's dazzling, that inspires, that gets people to look at it and say, oh, I work with these photographers and I'm super comfortable with these photographers, but I want to add this person to the list and I can't wait to work with this person. And you don't get that effect by doing something that's like a B+. You need like an A+ type of project. So executing to me is extremely important, that you have to do it like with no shortcuts. It doesn't matter if you can see the talent socks or not. You have to pick what the socks look like. You have to pick every little detail and you have to control everything and put effort into everything across the board. Let us see. So let's look at some examples. This is all theoretical, but let's see how this actually manifests itself in two projects that I did this with. One of the things that I realized as I was portfolio building was that agencies and brands, and this is also something that photo editors and creative directors told me in portfolio reviews, all these fitness brands love images of running. It's just the motion and the product, how the product looks, everything about it. Running images are crucial. And I noticed that I didn't have any in my portfolio. So this was, the research was like, realizing that. And then I sort of came up with a plan of some friends of mine ran a track club here in DC called Northeast Track Club. Mona, just a whole bunch of people run it that I'm friends with. And then I reach out to them. I said, hey, I'd love to hang out with you guys one day and start shooting. So I shot with them over at, I think Banneker, the track over at Banneker, and just got to know them a little bit here and there. And then they moved to another track, Cardozo, that's absolutely gorgeous. And they were starting a program called Better Your Mile. And it was an 8-week program where they run at the same time every day on Tuesday. And they put their members, which is like close to 200 people, on a training regimen, so that at the end of the 8 weeks, they can run their best mile. And so they asked me to join them for that process, and I jumped all over it. I shot with them for 7 weeks, and I did a ton of images with let's see. Let's take a look at some of these. Yeah, and this all came from shooting with them for 6 weeks, I think July and August. So I had beautiful golden hour. And I got to know a bunch of the runners. I got to identify the stars, the people who are, who would give me exciting looks. I made some friends. And like I said, the location, Cardozo, is absolutely gorgeous. It's super hard to beat. But also at the same time, I didn't want to just take typical running images. I wanted to get images that you don't see that often. From runners. I wanted to get something impactful. This guy was like, painted nails, hair. He was a very interesting character. So of course I had to get him. But yeah, I wanted to make images that make people like stop a little bit and take notice. So the way that I edited them, the tone that I put on them, the contrast, all of that stuff, doing that consistently over 7 weeks, I was able to build a nice small gallery with those images. Yeah, so that's how I got these series of images. Like, I really needed running shots in my portfolio. Hung out with this local group and was able to build that part over 7 weeks. That's how this shoot came about. Another example is the ASRV shoot that I did. I realized that I needed something that was like extremely polished and extremely clean. And so I decided to create a pitch deck as if I was shooting for ASRV. They're an athleisure brand, actually based here in LA, and big fan of their clothing, big fan of their sweatpants. They kind of got me through the first 2 years of the pandemic. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna set up a shoot for them. Let me take you through this pitch deck real quick. So this is the deck that I created. It took me about a month and a half to get this all situated. Let me go full screen with this. There we go. So I started with a story. I created a story about ASRV, how it's not like Peloton or SoulCycle or any of these places where it's big community and gadgets and computers and loud music and all that stuff. It's about simplicity and reliability. One person working out in one location with very simple weights, jump rope, things like that. So that's the ethos, the idea behind the campaign. And then I put together some sample images of the type of images I wanted to create and what was already out there. These aren't mine. These are another photographers, but they were working out as inspiration. There's different shot types, how wide I wanted to go and how close I wanted to go. What the portraits looked like and what the kind of portraits I wanted to make. This to me is the most important slide in the whole deck, because it informed how I was, like, the colors that I was going to use, which informed the location. I did a lot of scouting. I did a lot of driving around. This location is actually in Reston, Virginia. That's my brother, my nephew. But I got video, and it also informed the wardrobe. So I bought a ton of ASRV clothing and those sneakers. I spent something like around $500 buying everything, but I knew what I was going to buy because I already had the color scheme in mind. And then I also did talent scouting. I did the casting as well. This guy's he's a boxer in the DC area. He's actually become a friend of mine now. I've worked with him a bunch of times. He's really, really talented guy. Because he's a boxer, I gave him directions very gently. I asked him nicely to do things. I wasn't bullying him around like I do some other people. And this was the result. Oh, I also worked with a retoucher on this project. This was my first time working with a retoucher. It was not, it wasn't Joseph, but it's another retoucher here in LA named Lena, also incredibly talented. This is, I actually won an award for this image, but because a lot of the questions were answered in the pitch deck in terms of what the color was going to look like, what the location was, what the incentive for the shoot was, just one person working out by themselves, the type of editing that I wanted to be done to the images, the colors, and all of that, because all of those were decided ahead of time. Once it came time to shoot the campaign, it all went effortlessly, and it was very, very, like, I shot all of these in maybe an hour, if even like an hour and a half. And that's because I already knew what I wanted to do with it. So that was the pitch deck, and that was the shoot. And that's it. I don't know if I probably went under the 30 minutes, but yeah, that's it. That's all the questions all the info that I got. I do have 2 resources. If you go to Aaron's IG, the highlights have BTS, where you could see some of the images that I shared about the behind the scenes on his sets. He shoots for a ton of really big campaigns. But then there's also a highlight called How to Test, where he goes through the process of what a test shoot should look like, and who gets paid, who doesn't get paid, all of that stuff, and how much work you should put into it. And he actually has gotten, his test shoots have actually gotten a lot of work down the line. And the other is a podcast that I listen to all the time called The Photo Banter. My friend Alex Ganes is here, and he has interviews with an insane number of incredibly talented and like all-time great photographers. And they talk about their backgrounds, they talk about how they got started, and just have so much industry knowledge that they're sharing. And yeah, those 2 resources are absolutely brilliant. That's all I got.
Hanad, that was awesome. And I'm sorry, I've got a fire alarm going off here in the background.
Yes.
So I'm going to keep myself muted. But I'm going to let, if people want to unmute themselves, raise a hand. If you've got questions, please feel free to ask Hanad.
2 things. One, we can't hear the fire alarm, so you're good. But also, the ASRV pitch deck that I used to sort of organize my thoughts and get that ASRV shoot together. That's going to be available as a PDF, and I believe Mike is gonna share that. So if you guys want to download that and take a look at it at your own leisure. So we got some questions.
Yeah, and I can help out with some of the questions here. So Matthew had asked about the pitch deck. Did you write your own copy for that?
For the pitch deck?
Yeah, I like the copy starting off, and it just seemed very on point. So I was wondering if that was your advertising background that kind of informed that.
Yeah, it's I call my advertising background my cheat code.
Yeah,
Like it changes everything for me. It informs how I communicate with clients. It informs how I'm making the images, because I used to be the one receiving images, and I've received images where people are like, oh, we need this for a 728 by 90 banner, but also a 300 by 60 banner. So just knowing like how flexible an image has to be, knowing that on certain images, people are going to try to place copy on top of it. So there needs to be space and composition wise. It's been tremendously informative, just making the images. And then for the pitch deck, yes, being able to write copy was also a plus.
so I have another question. I don't want to cut in front of anybody else.
Okay, well, go ahead, Matt. You got the floor for a moment.
So once you've done that sort of spec shoot, then you have the images. Are you sending postcards to the company? Are you sending that to other companies? Like, what do you do with the body of work to make it work for you?
Right. So the primary goal, I think it's the way I sort of think about these things is that I go in with a goal.
Yeah.
And if I hit that goal, it's a success. Everything else is icing on the cake, right? So the goal was to make these images and add them to my portfolio. That came out wonderfully. I was like icing on the cake. But that was great. Well, the icing on the cake would have been if ASRV licensed the images or contacted me for a shoot or any of that stuff. So what I did was when I was getting ready to shoot this, I followed the owner of ASRV. And then I DM'd him and I thanked him for making great products. And I was like, I live in my ASRV sweatpants, and thank you for creating dope stuff. And he replied back and he was like, yeah, no problem. Glad you like it. So I already had like a little bit of a connection right there, right? A little bit of a dialogue. And when I posted the images, I tagged him and I tagged ASRV. And then he DM'd me and was like, these look amazing. Right. What I did not realize was while I was shooting it, they hired an internal photographer. So it wasn't going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
But I stuck with the goal was to put it in my portfolio, and that was a success. It would have been awesome if I got some work out of it directly, but that didn't happen. But yeah, so that was sort of like the play that I was making.
But just getting it out there, I mean, you're setting those connections, so it's down the line, maybe.
Yeah. I think Jomar and Nate also have their hands.
Yep. Yeah. Why don't we start with Jamar?
Oh, Jamar's on mute. I love this already.
Yeah. There we go.
There you go.
I clicked like 2 times, and for some reason I was still on mute. So great presentation, man. So just a quick question regarding social media and all that. We're seeing like more and more like video work, reels and shorts. So how photographers should handle this in terms like of branding and product work? Like, are you guys embracing this more and more, or like how do you guys are handling this?
In terms of like clients wanting more video, work, stuff like that. I am starting to do video now. I did actually a commercial documentary with Gorina, who's in the room for Brooks Running and Pacers. So that's definitely something that I'm going into, and I do see the industry going into that. I think a lot of photographers are starting to realize that and starting to do it. I think the beautiful thing is that more people work on video projects, right? You have your director, you have your DP, you have your editor, you have your colorist, there are like many different tasks. I think photographers, especially ones that work with a bunch of talent, photographers are natural directors, right? You're sort of telling people what to do. You're telling people the kind of emotions you want out of them, and so on and so forth. So I think photographers can transition to directing fairly easily, and then hire a DP, hire an editor, hire a colorist, hire a sound person. I think that's the way to, that's the move, because directing, and the beautiful thing about that is directors get all the shine. They sit on a chair with a monitor and they say, do it again. And everyone's like, ooh, they're amazing.
Nice.
Nate.
Great. And then, yeah, Nate, do you want to go ahead?
Hey, thanks for the presentation, Hanad. It was awesome. Jomar kind of stole my question, so I will just ask you, what shampoo and conditioner do you use?
Oh, I got this new beard oil because I
Yeah.
decided to grow my beard for winter. I forgot what it was called, but I will DM you. And I'll send
Cool.
it. I don't use
On a serious note, though, in terms of casting for the ASRV shoot, so were you reaching out to the talent there directly? Were you going through an agency? Like, what did that process look like to build the team that you were working with?
So I didn't necessarily want to use models. I wanted to use somebody who's like, for the somebody who's genuinely a fighter. So I searched the DC area for fighters. There are a few trainers that train cardio kickboxing and cardio boxing and stuff and things like that. I wanted somebody who was actually like getting in the ring and fighting. And Vic lives in DC, and he does that. He's also a trainer, but he had like a good, he didn't have like an insane following count and all of that stuff. I was like, he's just a nice homegrown, like a decent number of people know him, but he's not like super famous. And also a good looking guy with ripped muscles and veins and shit. So I was like, yeah, he's a good person to cast.
And then we've got a question from the chat. Robert's asking about your the releases with the running group. How did you handle that?
I didn't get releases from them because the images weren't being used for a campaign, right? I wasn't selling the images. I wasn't using them to go to New Balance or anything like that. And I also didn't anticipate any of that stuff was going to happen. I also got to know all of them, and I gave them all the images. There are like for each, I think each day that I shot them running, I got between 10 to 13 images. And if I took a picture of somebody, I gave them the image, and you could do whatever you want with it. And so I have relationships with all of these people. And if somebody comes to me for licensing, I can definitely reach out to them at any time and get them to sign a release, get them paid, all of that stuff. So I wasn't really as worried about the releases with them because of the access that I had to them. It's a very good question though.
Yeah. And then Rob's got a question about the pitch decks. He was wondering how you learned how to do these, I presume from your years in advertising, but I guess kind of following up on that, I'm a little curious, the experience of approaching a pitch deck as a photographer versus from the client side. What are some of the things you learned or some of the things that surprised you?
I think one of the thing that I like the pitch deck the most is that it forces you to ask questions that you didn't realize needed answering, right? So a lot of the times you go to a set and you all of a sudden have to start solving things, right? But once I started working on the pitch deck, I started like, okay, I need to buy clothes. Well, what kind of clothes should I get? Oh, damn, what colors should I get? Oh, I need a color, I need a color palette. And so I had to go back and I had to create the color palette. It's like, well, that changes the location, that changes the clothes that I'm buying, that changes the way the edit's going to look. So, all right, now I have to go back to the ASRV website, have to look at a whole new set of clothes and sort of. So it's as you're building it out, it's more of an exercise than an end product. Like at the end, you do get a product and you do get a deck, but building it out is an exercise. It's like storyboarding. It's like any of those things where the objective is to solve problems as you're building it, right? And so, you know, when you start off working the deck and you ask like, okay, what's this campaign about? You know, you're tempted to just grab some cool clothes, grab a hot person, put them in a location, just start shooting. But once you start work on the deck and you have to write down what the campaign's about, it changes what equipment you're bringing. It changes how it's going to look. It changes everything. So I think the objective of the pitch deck isn't to present something to somebody. It's to answer questions for yourself so that once you start shooting, you already have things solved. At least that's how I look at it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Shannon added, pitch deck is very similar to storyboarding for movies, so which is a really great point. Edgar wanted to know a little bit more about your agency experience before becoming a photographer. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I did this thing where I would oscillate between working an in-house creative and working at an agency. So they weren't like anything super glamorous. I wasn't working at Weidman Kennedy or anything like that. So the last agency that I worked for was in DC. It was called GMMB. It was pretty like super established in the political space. It was, I think, Obama's agency of record and Hillary Clinton's as well. And yeah, but just working on, you know, projects that have like, you know, $400,000 budgets and things like that, and working with, you know, the Gates Foundation. It's like a multi-million-dollar agency. Just being exposed to all that and being in creative meetings, talking about like, okay, there's an initiative where we're trying to educate people about a certain product or a certain initiative or something along those lines. Well, how do we do it creatively? And seeing you and your team come up with a beautiful idea and then seeing management water it down bit by bit and crush it over time, going through that experience is never good. But, you know, yeah, so that's a lot of I think the most important thing agency experience has taught me is you learn how people react to things. Advertising is, to me, the art of getting people in an emotional state so that they would do something that they normally wouldn't have done in a calm state. Sometimes it's you want them to purchase a product, or you want them to write their senator, or you want them to do something. But in order for them to do that, you have to get them in an emotional state first. And so you need to get people, you need to understand what gets people worked up.
That's awesome. All right, Alex had a question here. Wanted to know, how did you find some of your first clients? How did you approach marketing your work?
Which Alex is this?
Alex Gagne.
No, we blocked him. Marketing. There's a lot of things. I think I know what Alex is getting at, because he and I talk about this all the time. There is a tremendous amount of good and benefits to working the social media engine, right? I always tell people, I don't care if I have 50,000 followers. I don't care if there's a kid in Kuala Lumpur that likes my image. I want photo editors following me. I want creative directors following me. I want art directors following me. I want agents following me, producers, right? And so what I've noticed is that whenever like a big photographer works on a project and releases it, they tag all the people that worked on it. And you click on some of those names and you'd be shocked at how small of a following they have, right? So you'll have like a photo editor. The photo editor at Fast Company had like 500 followers. And so and a solid like 70 of them were really, really good photographers that I know and follow. So this is obviously somebody who gives out assignments. And I followed her. And then she followed me back. And then 6 months later, she sent me an email asking me to shoot for Fast Company. And the creative deck, the creative brief had like a ton of my images in it, you know? So it's just understanding that social media is, the social part of it is super important. You have to connect with people. You have to follow the right people. You have to, you know, someone posts something that you like, comment on it. You know, give people encouragement, interact with people, and not just likes. People see that comment and then they're like, oh, that was a funny comment, or oh, that was a snarky comment, which is usually what I do. And then they click on you and they see your work. And if they're a photo editor, you know, I'm not saying that's why you should be commenting, but be part of the social part of social media. And it's going to introduce you to people that you want to work with, that you want to work for, that also want you to work for them.
Great point. Great point. Ibrahim's got a question, says, how do you get access to certain locations, like the location with the boxer? Are these open locations, or do you have to make some calls? How's that work when, you know, especially on these self-assigned shoots?
Yeah, a lot of locations are open. I think like there's a public school I want to shoot at in DC that I think because it's a public school, we're allowed to shoot there, but you just have to ask permission first. There are other locations where you need permits, and you should know about that. Public parks, I know you have to get a permit to shoot if you're going to shoot commercial, and sometimes the permit's like $500. You know, you just have to give them notice. So yeah, you should definitely research whether or not you have access to that location. But permits are available. And also another thing about these shoots is that everyone talks about investment, but you might have to pay some money. You might have to spend some money. Like I spent like between $500 and $600 on that ASRV shoot. You know, just to buy the clothes. And yeah, you might have to save up some money for a couple months to get a good shoot going, but don't half-ass it. Yeah.
You know, treat it like a real job, right? And then Janelle's got a question. How often are you doing these portfolio building projects?
Excellent question. I try to get 2 in a year. I think that's a good clip there, because you know, photography is like peaks and valleys. If I see that a valley is coming up, like I know November and December of this year are going to be pretty quiet, and so is probably January. So I have some video projects that I'm working on and lining up and getting situated. So yeah, I think I try to get them on a fairly regular basis.
And let's see, Lord Chase has a question about how much work would you say you've directly gotten from these test shoots?
I only ask because it doesn't seem to be working for me.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's hard to know if it is working for you. It's hard to, well, I think it's easy to know if it is working for you. It's hard to know if it isn't working for you, right? So if it is working for you, somebody will reach out to you and say, hey, we'd love to work out with you. And then you start talking to them and they're like, oh my God, I love this series, right? And that's when you're like, okay, I get what's going on over here. But then people might actually see the test shoot and like the work, but not tell you. And that might be why they want to work with you, you know? So it's hard to discount it, but it's easy to actually point it out. As for me specifically, these test shoots are, yeah, they're a pretty big part of how I get work. And like the Northeast Track Club work, I showed it on my portfolio review to a creative director over at Rivian. And he was like, okay, I'm going to give you a list of places to go to and creative directors to email this to. So, because you need to create you need to show people this exact series, because this is sort of where the fitness industry is running to. So it's like, I'm actually sending out emails and saying, hey, I worked on a project, blah, blah. So, you know, if things happen, things happen.
Great. And then another question about the costs of doing these. What about the talent? How have you been able to work out, you know, some of the talent you've been hiring?
Right. So this is something that Aaron sort of talks about on his test highlight. If you are getting something out of the test shoot or the spec shoot, you don't get paid, right? So if you have a makeup artist, a stylist, an assistant, a retoucher, and talent, the only person who gets paid is the assistant, because the assistant can't put that shoot in their portfolio, right? But the makeup artists, they get some creative direction and they get to put it in their portfolio. The stylist, this is their time to play as well. So they get to add that to their portfolio because they style the shoot. The retoucher gets to add it. So the talent gets to use these images in their social media, on their website, all of that stuff. So typically you don't pay people if they're getting something out of it. And at the same time, you give them the images for free, right? So everybody that I've worked with on these test shoots, they get all the images. You can do what you want with them.
Awesome. And then there's lots of messages in the meeting chat, going back to Elsie's question about the images kind of playing to the long game, you know, so you can't always necessarily connect the dots. And let's see, we've got.
Can I follow up my question? Do you mind?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I have not been able to get, you know, makeup artists and creative directors and things to do the work for free. And so like all of my test shoots are fully out of pocket production level shoots, and I can't sustain this. Like I just can't. But at this point, like in the food world, there's a really small number of people, and I can't just keep asking those people over and over to do work for free. And I was just wondering, do you think the best idea is to just pay them, or try and expand my market and like look for other people in other cities who I would then have to pay to come down here? Like I'm kind of stuck right now and running out of money.
Yeah, that's a bit of a tricky situation. I think doing the work yourself is one way to go about it, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's the idea isn't that we can't do any of these things ourselves. Like I can style, I can do a bunch of this stuff, but the idea is that at my best, I'm going to do a B-level job. Getting somebody who's like really talented at it is going to elevate that, right?
Yeah.
So you could do a smaller shoot where you do all the work yourself. You do all the styling, all the, you know, makeup and you know, that would be the easy answer. The other answer is maybe you do one big one a year, right? Where you save money over time and you work on like, let's get a big project going. And then the other is sort of like, I think a lot of times when I work with people, there's an element of giving them license, right? Giving them some agency and telling them that, remember all those times you wished you could play? This is your time to play. And this is, you know, your time to be creative and your time to like, let's work together on coming up with a vision that we're both like always wanted to work on. And that's the incentive there is that you're not going to get paid for it, but you're going to get something that you've always wanted to do and some way that you've always wanted to play. That sometimes works as well. But yeah, it's a bit tricky. I'm a fan of one big shoot a year. save some money every month and then go ham.
It's great advice. Great advice. So we're just going to do two more questions. We got one from Taylor, and then Rob was going to ask a question. Taylor wanted to know, like with the spec work you're doing, have you ever experienced a company using your ideas without hiring you?
No. It's hard to say. It's hard to tell. I will say this. It happens. It happens a lot, and it happens everywhere, right? In terms of the field, right? When I was working at GMB, there was an RFP, a request for proposals from a pretty decent sized company on an installation for an event, and we worked on this really good idea of like how it was going to be built out and how the whole thing was going to look and the objectives behind it. And we put a ton of hours into coming up with that proposal. Took us like maybe 2 or 3 months. Presented it to them. They loved it. They were like, oh yeah, but the budget is a little bit, it's a little bit too high. And then 6 months later, we saw they did the exact thing that we proposed with a smaller agency, smaller budget, not as good, but pretty effective. So all that to say, like, people are going to steal your ideas. People are going to execute it, and not as good as you probably would have executed because it's your idea. But ideas being stolen happens at every level. Like an agency will steal a photographer's idea, a client will steal an agency's idea. Maybe it gives you a little bit of license to see what agencies have done and what other creative directors have done, and be like, you know what, I like that idea. I'm going to do a test shoot that's inspired by that and make it my own. Don't feel bad about getting inspiration from other places, because other places are not only going to get inspiration from you, they will downright steal from you. So,
okay. Yeah. And then our final question here is actually from Robin, not Rob. Apologies, Robin. Robin wanted to know, is it typical to do visual research like you did with the running in order to refine an idea? And are there resources for how to put together a pitch deck if you don't have experience with graphic design?
What was the first question again?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead and take it.
The first question was, I tend to not know how to refine an idea, and I'm a kind of like see it when I see it. And so I thought it was interesting that you did this, the visual research with that run group prior to refining your idea. I often find myself like the person that doesn't pre-visualize everything until I see it. And so I just wondered if that's typical for you, or if most people who are good at that kind of commercial work already have a pre-visualized idea ahead of time without visual research.
Right. It's typical for me because of my background. There's a little bit of the way I think about it is the artist comes out at the end. Up front, you're a strategist, you're a salesman or woman, you're somebody who's going through things in a much more at least for me, I go through things in a much more technical way in the front end, in terms of like, who's the audience, so I think about it more like that. And then once all this technical stuff gets sorted out, then the artist comes out and I get to play and I get to have fun, because I've put myself in this, in this tight box that I can play in. When you go to like bigger sets and bigger shoots, another person to take a look at is Art Streiber. If you look at his Instagram, his posts are always like a behind the scenes post and then the result. And these are like massive sets and an insane amount of work goes into it. But if you'll notice, you look at some of the behind the scenes, they have a wall with a ton of images on there, right? Images of inspiration, images where they're like, okay, we're going to try to duplicate this, or, things like that, where getting an idea of what kind of what kind of things you want to capture solves a lot of these questions that you normally would have on set. You kind of don't want to go on set and be like, oh, try this or try that. You know what I mean? I think there's definitely room for that, but to come in with your set images where you're like, okay, these are definitely the ones that I want to get. And then once I get these, we can dance, we can have fun, we can play around, and we can, you know, we can do that. Also, once you get those images, there's the comfort in like, we got the job done, right? Now let's have fun. Let's have, like, a director used to do it where he would make the actors go through their part like again. And then once he felt he had a cut that he was going to use, he would tell them, okay, now do one for the artist.
Oh, okay.
That's when the actor got to do whatever they wanted and played. And sort of that's sort of how I think about it. I try to go in with like the set images that I'm really trying to make. And then from there, we're golden. We're trying to have fun. We're going to do whatever we want.
Okay. And then the other attachment to that was you have a really good, obviously good skill sets to put together a pitch deck, both with your writing and your image background. And I just don't have any background in graphic design, and was looking for, you know, how to educate myself on how to do a really good photo deck like that.
So
pitch deck.
yes, there are services out there, right? I think one is wearepitch.tv.
Okay.
There are places where you can download pitch decks in InDesign. There are all sorts of resources out there. There are places, if you DM me, I can send you some more, and I can send you links to these places. This goes for everybody. If you have questions that didn't get answered, feel free to DM me. But yes, there are definitely resources out there where you don't have the skill set. You can hire somebody else. You can pay for like a batch of InDesign files. There are all sorts of different ways to do it.
Okay, thank you.
We Are Pitch is also a designer writer duo. So
okay,
they will also help with the writing. Thank you for your question.
thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, Hanad, thank you very much for this amazing presentation and sharing so generously with everybody. Really appreciate it. And as you mentioned, we'll go ahead and send out the pitch deck that Hanad shared with us. We'll send that to everybody here. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. And don't forget, 7 p.m. Eastern tonight, APA Biz is doing their event on, it's titled, I will give you the actual title, Value of the Personal Project, How Your Archives Can Pay Off in the Future. And that's with Bill Bernstein. So I hope you'll join us for that tonight. All right. And thanks everybody for coming out. Okay. Have a great day, everyone.